All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel again, man. Thank y'all so much for coming over. All right. As you guys can see by the title, we are back for another Mr. Ballin video. Again, if you guys aren't subscribed to his channel, please do. This brother is amazing with his storytelling and his in-depth research. I'll leave the original video in the description for you guys to check out more. All right. Moment between life and death caught on camera. Now, I don't know if this is going to be one story or multiple stories, but I'm here for it. As you guys know, I try not to pause the video too much, try to let him do his thing with the storytelling, unless I absolutely need to. All right, so we ain't gonna waste no more time. Let's jump right into it.
Have you ever wondered what happens when you die? Well, today, I'm going to tell you 3 stories that all give insights into what might actually happen. And these are not hokey stories. These are stories with, evidence, photographic evidence in some cases. These are deep, unsettling stories. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the like button's house and flip all of their wall-mounted TVs upside down. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That like button, man. Could you imagine? Because most people ain't gonna notice right away. But could you imagine you cut on that TV and everything is up? Boy, I would freak the hell out. And scream.
On the evening of December 27th, 1984, a 16-year-old boy named John Boulware sat in the passenger seat of his best friend's Jeep as they drove down a residential road in St. Paul, Minnesota. John's best friend was driving, and 2 more of their friends from school were in the back seat. They were all talking and laughing and singing along to the radio. It was dark outside and it was rainy and kind of an awful night, but John didn't care. He was way too excited because that night, he and his buddies were on their way to see the megastar musician Prince perform live. So Prince was obviously a massive, massive star at the time.
Rest in peace.
And anyone at the time would have been pretty excited to go see him perform live. But this was a particularly big deal for John and his friends because Prince was actually from Minneapolis, Minnesota, which was just 20 minutes away from St. Paul, where they were from. So it was kind of like they were going to see their hometown hero. Now, John and his friends didn't expect to become, huge rock star gods like Prince. But there was just something about seeing, this hometown guy achieve his dreams on an international scale. It was just really inspiring. And so again, John and his friends are just so stoked about this concert, they can't wait to get there. And so John, with all this excitement, he turns around to talk to his friends in the backseat about this concert and how great it's gonna be. But right as he turns around, he hears a loud screeching sound and he whips his head back around just in time to see the headlights of the car aimed at this tree that they're careening straight towards. He screams, he hears his friends screaming, they smash into the tree, and everything goes dark. A few minutes later, a St. Paul police officer named Brian Coyle and his patrol partner pulled up behind the now wrecked Jeep. They'd been on their regular patrol when they'd gotten a call about the car crash. Now, the call hadn't come from anybody in the crash, so they really didn't know what to expect. Now, when Coyle stepped out of his own car and walked towards the wreck, it was raining and dark out and, the visibility wasn't great, but right away he saw there were 3 teenagers who were standing upright outside of the car. Now, they looked pretty shaken up and they visibly had some cuts on their body, but overall, his assessment was they were basically okay. And so while Coyle's partner went to go examine the wreck itself, Coyle walked up to these teenagers. And one of them, through tears, explained to Coyle that he had been driving, and he said he had been just going too fast, and he tried to take a sharp turn, and he hydroplaned, lost control, and they hit the tree. And then the driver said, it didn't matter though how this happened, because what mattered now is his friend, John, is still in the car, and he's not moving. And so Officer Coyle left the teenagers and told them to stay put, and he walked over to the wreck where his partner was, and Coyle, he knelt down and he looked inside the Jeep, and he saw the other teenager, John, slumped over inside the passenger seat, and he wasn't moving. And so Coyle asked his partner, "Hey, have you checked him? Is he okay?" And the partner looked at Coyle and just said, "No, he's dead." And so Officer Coyle took a deep breath, and while his partner called for backup and taped off the scene, Coyle went back to John's friends and broke the news as gently as he could. But of course, they were all devastated. The only thing Coyle could do to help them was to call an ambulance to come and take them to the hospital to get checked out. Once the ambulance had taken them away, and once John's body had been removed from the Jeep, Officer Coyle and his partner began to document the scene by taking photos of the crashed car with a camera. Now, this was all standard practice, and so while they did it, they didn't think anything of it. However, about a week later, when Coyle and his partner were reviewing the photos they took, Coyle noticed something shocking. One of the pictures that Officer Coyle had taken was so bizarre that it ended up in newspapers, not only in Minnesota, but all over the country. Even today, 30 plus years later, people are still talking about it. And when you see this photo, you'll understand why. This is the photograph. And if you look at the top right, above the Jeep's open door, you'll see something that could just be a flash of light, but to Officer Coyle and so many others who have looked at this photograph, they say that weird apparition-looking thing above the Jeep looks eerily similar to John Boulware's face, the 16-year-old victim of the car crash. And it almost looks like this photograph captured.
Yeah, man. I mean, the side, like, of course, his picture is facing us, but just that side profile, it looks like the hair. That's crazy, man. Like he's going, oh, that's crazy. You know how sometimes you look up in the clouds and sometimes you see like faces? Nah, man. Sheesh.
They say that weird apparition-looking thing above the Jeep looks eerily similar to John Boulware's face, the 16-year-old victim of the car crash. And it almost looks like this photograph captured like the moment of John's spirit departing Earth, like it's showing his final moment in life when he died, screaming as the car is about to crash into this tree.
Nah, man. I would have tripped the hell out reviewing that. My goodness.
One evening in the summer of 1974, a 60-year-old doctor named Julian Kirchick sat beside his backyard pool at his home in Old Westbury, New York, which is a suburb of New York City. It was a quiet, sunny day, and Dr. Kirchick was glad to have some time to relax. He was a surgeon at a local hospital, and he also had a wife and 4 children, so it was not often that he got a moment of peace to himself. And so Dr. Kirchick leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes and tried to relax for a second, when all of a sudden he heard something rustle in the bushes nearby. Now at first he just figured it must be a squirrel or a bird or something, so he didn't even bother opening his eyes, like this is just nature, it's fine. But this rustling sound persisted, and it just wouldn't stop. And so eventually, Dr. Kirchick did open his eyes, and he got up out of his chair to go see what was going on. Now, these bushes were like 20 feet away from the doctor, and so in order to truly investigate, he had to get up and actually walk over there. And so he gets up and he takes a few steps when he suddenly freezes. Because now, when he's looking at the bushes, he sees there is someone standing basically in the bushes, a person. But he realized this person was not a normal looking person. The person was wearing what appeared to be this dark, long robe that covered their whole body. And in fact, the robe kind of obscured their face. It was like they were this dark presence just standing there in the middle of these bushes. And so Dr. Kirchick is just frozen, having no idea how to react to this. I mean, does he call out for help? Does he, chase this guy out of his yard? Like, what does he do here? And as he's standing there transfixed, this person in the robe extends one of their arms, this long, skinny arm, and kind of begins to beckon Dr. Kirchick towards them. And Dr. Kirchick went from being sort of startled to being terrified.
Grim Reaper?
This figure basically looked like the Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
And it felt like now the Grim Reaper is beckoning him to come with him, to come die, basically. That was the feeling he suddenly had. And it was unbelievably overwhelming. And so Dr. Kerchak is staring, horrified. He blinks for a second, and the man is gone. Over the next few days, Dr. Kerchak obsessed over what he had just seen. I mean, really, it felt like he had just witnessed the Grim Reaper, and worse, that the Grim Reaper was like telling him to come with him. Like he was signaling to Dr. Kerchak that his time on Earth had come to an end, that his death was imminent. That's what Dr. Kerchak is thinking. But Dr. Kerchak, he's a surgeon. He's a man of science and reason, and he can't understand how this could have happened. I mean, even if it was just a hallucination, it was so vivid. It was so visceral. Like, how could this be? What's going on with him? But the problem Dr. Kerchak had was, who's he going to talk to about this? Hey, by the way, I saw the Grim Reaper, and now I'm worried I'm going to die soon. Or maybe somebody in my family's going to die soon, or a patient is going to die soon. Like, who's going to have that conversation with him? But at the same time that he was feeling increasingly isolated because of this, whatever he saw, he couldn't help but feel like it was real, and it was driving him mad. Like, I'm not doing anything, and something bad is imminent. What do I do? And so for months, Dr. Kerchak just carried this incredible weight with him everywhere he went, like this constant sense of unease, until October of 1974. That month, Dr. Kerchak suddenly got sick. He had a fever, and it just wouldn't go away. And so he went to his own doctor for a checkup, and his doctor told him, I got some bad news. That day, Dr. Kerchak was diagnosed with an incurable form of blood cancer. He was heartbroken, but he was not totally surprised, because for him, this sort of felt like a validation of what he'd already seen. Death, the Grim Reaper, had been calling him, and now Dr. Kerchak knew why. Dr. Kerchak would share his story with newspapers, which is how we know about it today. And shortly after sharing his story, Dr. Kerchak would die.
Sheesh, man.
Hey guys, I have a really cool announcement for you. So right now, if you head over to shopmrballin.com, you will find brand new limited time merch items on our site. We have the brand new signature Mr. Ballin hat. Okay, you gotta wear that backwards, of course. There's the black version, and also we have the white mesh version as well. Very cool. It's the thumbs up logo. Very nice, cool hat. And then, of course, we also have this nifty new flannel color, okay? Yellow. Really fits the vibe of the fall season. Okay, get yourself one of these. But remember, these are limited time items just for the fall, so get them while you can. Again, that is shopmrballin.com. You got the new flannel, the multiple versions of the hat that you gotta wear backwards. Go check it out. Again, shopmrballin.com. Thank you.
This gonna be a long one, huh? It's a big chunk of the video left.
On the afternoon of Sunday, August 27th, 2000, a 50-year-old husband and father named Bruce Leniger sat in his living room in Lafayette, Louisiana. He and his wife and his 2-year-old son James had just gotten home from church, and now Bruce was just trying to relax. However, it was proving very difficult to relax because as Bruce is trying to sit on the couch and just kind of close his eyes for a second, his son, James, the 2-year-old, has his toy plane, his favorite toy plane, and he is repeatedly smashing it into the coffee table as loud as he can, saying, plane crash, plane crash, plane crash. And while, of course, James is a kid, he's gonna be loud and noisy and obnoxious, that's what kids do. But for Bruce, he's watching his son do this, and he couldn't help but be really concerned. Because lately, over the past few months, James had become unnaturally fixated, not on planes, but on plane crashes. And even more specifically, James had begun having these recurring nightmares, 4 or 5 times a week.
Oh, man. For those of you who may be new to the channel, because I'm pretty sure the people who have been here for a while know that I love to travel, but I hate flying. I hate it, hate it, hate it. And I don't hate too many things, but that I hate. And I be trying to get over it. People say, oh, just take this or drink this. Don't work. But just, I ain't gonna do well with this video at all.
where he'd wake up terrified and he would say he, James, had just been in a horrible fiery plane crash. And it was like every night. That was the nightmare. And it was like Bruce and his wife didn't even know what to make of this. Like, where's he getting this from? James was a pretty sheltered kid. Like, he wasn't being exposed to, horrible plane crashes, either in movies or TV shows or books. I mean, he's a 2-year-old. It just made no sense that he was having this recurring nightmare. But what made it even more kind of unsettling is that James wasn't just fixated on the plane crash aspect of this nightmare. He also began to tell Bruce and his wife these weird details about the plane crash, because it was always the same plane crash in his nightmare. He began telling his parents that the Japanese shot me down. And Bruce and his wife are like, what is he referencing? Like, is this a World War II reference? But again, he's 2. Like, developmentally, it's not something he would say even if he was exposed to it. Like, it just didn't make any sense. Now, over the past few months that this behavior had really ramped up, Bruce and his wife had taken James to the doctor to say, what's going on here? Like, what's my kid doing? I don't understand any of this. And the doctors were all like, he's a kid. Like, yeah, it's a weird fixation he's got, but he'll grow out of it. Like, don't worry about it. But to Bruce and his wife, it just seemed like James was not growing out of it. He was just getting more and more fixated as time went on. And so as Bruce is sitting there on the couch watching James for the millionth time smash his toy plane into the coffee table and pretend it was this plane crash he couldn't stop thinking about, Bruce decided he had to do something about this. And so over the next couple of months, Bruce, instead of trying to figure out what was wrong with James that was causing him to fixate on this plane crash, instead of doing that, he began sort of like leaning in and asking James to give him more information about whatever he was seeing in his nightmare. Like, give me all the specifics you can possibly recall. And James would eventually let on that it wasn't just the Japanese that shot him down, it was the Japanese military. And also, the type of plane that James was flying in apparently was a Corsair plane. Bruce had never heard of that before, and again, he's looking at his 2-year-old son thinking, how do you even know what a Corsair plane is? But nonetheless, that's what James said. And so Bruce doesn't know what to do with this information, but again, he's just trying to learn. And so in November of that,
This kind of feels like that show that was coming on TV, if you guys remember, Manifest. Remember that show? That was a crazy show. Dude, this is trippy. Let me rewind a little bit.
thinking, how do you even know what a Corsair plane is? But nonetheless, that's what James said. And so Bruce doesn't know what to do with this information, but again, he's just trying to learn. And so in November of that year, Bruce found himself sitting in the living room, and he had this World War II coffee table book that he had actually purchased for his father, but he hadn't given it to him yet. And he saw James, playing with his plane, smashing it into the coffee table. And Bruce, he grabs this coffee table book full of pictures of pilots in combat and war, and he flips to pictures of pilots from World War II. Because now, Bruce is thinking, maybe my son somehow is imagining a scene from World War II. A pilot has crashed in World War II, the Japanese military shot them down.
How?
No idea how he got this image, but that could be what he's thinking about. And so he's like, well, maybe I'll just start looking at pictures from World War II of pilots, and maybe somehow or another James will look at this and something will click for him. Bruce really didn't know what he was trying to get out of this, but either way, he called James over and he shows him this book. And he's like, James, do you recognize any of these planes? Like, are any of these planes the Corsair plane that you flew, in your dream? Is any of this stuff sort of lining up with your dream? Again, he's talking to a 2-year-old, but the 2-year-old sort of got it. James looked at the pages, but nothing clicked. James sort of reached down and was just kind of flipping through all the pages, and there was nothing. There was no connection with James. But towards the end of the coffee table book, where Bruce is thinking, like, what am I even doing here? I'm like prompting my 2-year-old to research World War II with me. Like, what is this? What is going on here? But as James is flipping the pages, he suddenly stops and he points at one of the pages and he says to his dad, that's where I was shot down. And he's pointing at the Battle of Iwo Jima. And so Bruce, again, he doesn't really know what he's trying to accomplish here, but, clearly his son has pointed out this particular fact that's sort of roughly tied in with the other things he's brought up. He's had this dream about being a pilot who crashes because the Japanese military shot him down. He's highlighting a battle in Japan during World War II where, the Allies were fighting the Axis powers and the Japanese, could have been shooting somebody down. So it sort of made sense. Okay, fine. Maybe my son's dream is about something that happened at the Battle of Iwo Jima. Don't know how this even happens. Don't know how this is possible, but I'm going to do some research. And so that's what Bruce does. He begins researching the Battle of Iwo Jima. Doesn't even really know what he's looking for, but he just wants to see if there's anything connected to what his son has been saying. And what he eventually discovers actually is sort of a relief. He discovers that there is no record of any Corsair airplanes crashing during the Battle of Iwo Jima. In fact, no Corsair planes at all were flown during the Battle of Iwo Jima. And his son James had been saying specifically, I flew a Corsair plane. Like that was the plane that crashed. And so he's thinking, okay, there's a hole in my son's story. Like he clearly must have latched on to some event somehow. Somebody said it to him, he heard it, whatever it is. And in his 2-year-old mind, he sort of warped it and that's what he believes happened, but it's not real. Like he's not actually recalling something that happened in the Battle of Iwo Jima. Like this is just, a false memory or something. However, Bruce was unable to definitively find the names of pilots who actually flew in the Battle of Iwo Jima. He wanted to find if there was any pilots named James who potentially crashed, during that battle, but he just couldn't find the information. Maybe it existed somewhere, but he couldn't find it. And so Bruce had this idea to get in touch with this old veterans group. All these old guys who had served in the Battle of Iwo Jima that were still alive. They were based out in San Diego, and they got together periodically and just sort of had social hours and stuff like that. And Bruce, he goes out to San Diego, and under false pretenses, he basically tells the group that he's shooting a documentary about the Battle of Iwo Jima, and he needs some information, about certain pilots that flew during the battle. He goes out there, and he goes to one of their social events, and he begins asking around, asking if anybody knew about any pilots named James who were shot down during the Battle of Iwo Jima. And basically all the men he talked to directed him to go talk to the group's historian, this one guy who kind of had all the information about what had happened during this battle. And so Bruce goes over to this guy and he starts asking him questions about, any pilots that, were shot down during the battle, do you know? And the historian, he tells Bruce that, during that battle, virtually no planes were shot down. However, there was one plane that was shot down. A single US Air Force pilot was shot down during the Battle of Iwo Jima, and he was killed. And that pilot's name was James Houston Jr. Bruce couldn't help but be truly shocked that the only pilot shot down during the Battle of Iwo Jima happened to be named James. Like, that just seemed like a coincidence that couldn't be possible, considering what his son was saying. And so suddenly, Bruce doesn't know what to make of this information he's been given. For so long, his 2-year-old son, named James, has been talking about how in his dream he's been shot down by the Japanese military during the Battle of Iwo Jima. And now he's being told there was a single pilot shot down in real life during the Battle of Iwo Jima, and his name was James? Like, how is that possible? That just seems impossible. And so at this point, Bruce is really holding on to the fact that his son had said his plane that he was shot down in was a Corsair plane. And this guy, James Houston Jr., who was shot down, the plane he was shot down in was not a Corsair plane. And so Bruce is telling himself, like, okay, this is just a crazy coincidence. Like, this didn't somehow happen to my son. He's not like channeling somebody else who died years ago. Like, that can't be what's happening here. This is just a wild set of circumstances. That's all this is. But he's freaked out now. And so he calls his wife and he tells her about what he's learned, and he kind of downplays how much this has really unsettled him. But he ultimately tells his wife, and the two of them decide, okay, you know what? Let's just do a little bit more research and just figure out what's going on here. Like, this is just so crazy. We got to do a little bit more research. And in doing research about James Houston Jr., they discover that James has a sister who is still alive. And so they decide to contact her. Not really even sure what they're going to say, but they figure, you know what, let's just get in touch with her and just tell her what's going on. Who knows? Maybe somehow she can explain this. Who knows? And so kind of on a whim, James and his wife, they send a message to this woman, to the sister. And the sister, when she finds out there's this 2-year-old who's sort of referencing her brother's death in some way, for whatever reason, her reaction was to send actual physical photographs of James Houston Jr. when he was a pilot, when he served in the military. She just sent a whole bunch of pictures to Bruce, his wife, and James to look at. Like, there really wasn't a clear set of what do we do now, and so that's what she did. Here are some pictures. And when Bruce looked at these photos, it was like his whole world was completely rocked. Because in one of the photos that clearly showed James Houston Jr., he is standing in front of a plane, and that plane was a Corsair plane. And so at this point, for Bruce, it felt like the set of circumstances, the coincidences here, were simply too much to ignore. This is no longer coincidence. This is something else. And also, there's one other small detail that now was sort of bubbling up in Bruce's mind, and that was, periodically, his son James would talk about how he really wasn't named James. He was named James III. Just periodically, his son would say that. Not every time, but he brought it up enough that it was sort of a known thing, that he was James III. And now Bruce is thinking, James Houston Jr.? That's James II. My son? How could he possibly know all these things that happened to James Houston Jr. if he was not James III, James Houston Jr.'s reincarnated soul? Bruce would eventually take his son's story to the news, and the family would film a primetime segment on ABC about it. James was soon invited to the Battle of Iwo Jima Veterans Reunion, where he would shock the group with his knowledge of the battle. James also met James Houston Jr.'s sister, and when he did, he called her by a nickname that only her late brother ever used. After that, even she was convinced that her brother's spirit had come back to Earth in James III. If reincarnation is real, James's story is one of the most credible and well-documented cases in history.
How? How would he know? 2 years. I don't care if the parents went every day, word for word, and told him all this information for him to remember. He's 2 years old. He ain't gonna remember all that. Nah. That just gave me goosebumps. That was insane. I was trying to see where it was going. I'm like, all right, like what the hell is going on, man? I don't know. I really wasn't thinking what was going to go on, but I wasn't expecting that. But for him to have all that knowledge and to remember all this stuff, that makes me want to do some more research on that. Those are some crazy stories, man. That guy saying the Grim Reaper, oof. That's scary, man. And then, I mean, look how we started with that smoke or whatever, looking like the face. Whew. Ladies and gentlemen, thank y'all so much for coming over. Hope y'all enjoyed. If so, go ahead, like, share, comment, and subscribe, man. Shout out to Mr. Ballin. Wow. All right. Peace out.